11th of August 2022. In this Skidmark, I want to talk about the Energy Armageddon that is on the doorstep of Europe. But before I go to the facts that is in that case, I need to make the following clear. It is my opinion that we have allowed a special super race to develop amidst us. And it happened over a period of about 40 years. When I was a youngster, politicians were usually successful people from the community that decided that they want to become representatives in the government, and they participated in elections and then landed in parliament or whatever. They would serve their terms there, and while they are there, they are working for their community, trying to make things happen that will advance the interests of their community. And these people were, because of the fact that they were successful people in their private lives, they were capable in their political positions to do sensible things. But as time went on, we started getting these professional politicians. People that go to university and they get a degree in some humanities or political science or something like that, and then when they graduate, they immediately go into the stream where they know that they will end up in parliament or something like that. So by the 80s, we started seeing people rising in the political landscape that were, in my opinion, professional politicians. These people had very little real experience of life. Many of them have no clue of what a business is and how a business operates, what a farm is and how a farm operates, what it takes to make a transport system run and things like that. And they were professional politicians. And you also saw how they will change alliances and allegiances just to retain their seats in wherever they are. And so the political race picked up strength, and by the late 90s, it was obvious that these professional politicians were solidly in the saddle. And things started going wrong, because these people were implementing rules and regulations and things to promote ideas and agendas. And it was no longer for the benefit of the people, but for the benefit of the party. And in the 2000s, this became more and more, and then I'm going to skip. We get to what happened 3 years ago with the pestilence and everything around that, and all of us had first-hand experience of how things could be implemented that has absolutely zero advantage for the people. And we just sat quietly while millions of jobs were destroyed, millions of small businesses were destroyed, and millions of lives were destroyed. I could not believe my eyes when I saw how millions of people just accepted an instruction from government to stay at home. To me, that was something extremely disturbing. And I was also amazed by the strong propaganda machine that promoted that agenda. Now today, facts are beginning to surface, and we are seeing that these things were not right. The most scary part is we are seeing that people are losing their lives, and it looks like there are certain parts of the population where it's beginning to settle in their minds that they have been conned and that their lives have been destroyed, their loved ones is lost, and all of that for an agenda and nothing real. But this is where we are. We are sitting with organizations like the WEF and the WHO that controls our lives, and they make decisions for us, and we cannot do anything to stop them, because they are firmly in control. And the most scary part of it is none of those guys have been elected. Then we come to Europe. The initial EU idea was just to make travel between countries easier and the movement of people between those countries easier, and in that create more commercial opportunities. But like everything else in this world, pretty soon that EC in Brussels started accumulating power. And the scary part of the EC is that those people are not directly elected. They are seconded there, and they have positions of power that can influence every person in the EU's life. Today, the European Union is basically a replica of the old USSR. And there are many people that are going to be upset about me saying that, but that is the truth. And this European Union has amassed for themselves a military arm in the shape of NATO. And that military arm is far away from what the original NATO was supposed to be. And we can see that. And we can see how NATO was used to corner Russia and to keep on tormenting Russia. And today we sit with a situation that that pot is cooked over and Russia decided to resist. And we're sitting in a situation that there are a lot of people that are driving a hate mission against Russia and Russians specifically. But what they don't want to accept is that Russia was threatened and they had no option but to fight back. Either fight back or get invaded and destroyed by this EU monster that wants to devour everything. We also have a situation in the EU that there's a lot of countries in the EU that really shouldn't be in the EU because they are breakaway, actually provinces from the old USSR, and in there as an entity, they do not have a commercial life. They cannot exist without external financial support. Part of the old USSR, they were fine. Being independent, they cannot operate. And the EU has stepped in and took those, I want to call them, orphan children in. And the EU took over the role of the old USSR. And they are now supporting and maintaining those countries. But they did it specifically just to get closer to Russia and to expand NATO. And today, this morning, we're sitting with a situation where the Brussels cabal took decisions about sanctions against Russia that has backfired and is now destroying Europe, and America is also feeling the pain. And I'm not going to talk about what's happening on the east side of Russia, because that is something that I'll handle in a different Skidmark. But the reality is, the West underestimated Russia. They underestimated the Russian military power, and they underestimated the Russian internal economic strength. And that is where we are. And we're sitting with a massive energy crisis facing Europe. A crisis that Ursula von der Crazy and her cabal, under direction of the White House, or the Shut House as I call it, has embarked on a sanction mission against Russia, which is now devouring Europe. And that is my opinion. Our problem today, decent human beings sitting here watching this, we are in the hands of this political race that has now elevated themselves to a place of supremacy, and they are acting as if they are totally untouchable. But I've got news for them. They should go and read the world's history. There is numerous examples of where megalomaniac operators were eventually removed by the population. And I have no doubt that Europe is on the brink of a revolution, and we are going to see heads roll. The combination of the pestilence after effects and this energy crisis are going to make people rethink their position. So, let's start with the topic. We are being warned of a £4,200 winter fuel bill. We are seeing illegals coming over here in droves daily, being offered free board and lodging plus a telephone. This has got to stop right now. For God's sake, do something. Retweet if you agree. And I can sense this man's frustration. But the reality is, the super race has decided that people that are culturally unified and are independent and are self-sufficient in their food production and business production and things is something that cannot be tolerated, because those people cannot be controlled, and they allowed a tsunami of immigrants to flood into Europe, and secondly they used the pestilence to wipe out the middle class. And then there's this one. UK power supply under threat. Norway may reduce electricity exports to the UK due to the low water levels that threaten domestic hydroelectric power output, the Guardian newspaper reported, citing Oslo's petroleum and energy minister. Now, you can read all of that if you want to. The reality is that the UK is in deep trouble, and a lot of that is of their own making. And instead of investing in their country own infrastructure and investing in their own people's well-being, the UK government found billions of pounds to send to the Ukraine. Hungarian energy firm MOL confirms payment for transit of Russian oil through Ukraine via Druzhba pipeline. Expects replies to resume in the coming days. This is important because Ukraine has switched off that transit line and refused payment from the Russian company. And they said that the EU sanctions prevent them from taking the money from the Russians, which is total bullshit, because Ukraine is not part of the EU. But the West's favorite child, Zelensky, can do what he likes. Russia's oil exporter Transneft will resume transit to Hungary and Slovakia later on Wednesday. Transit was briefly halted due to a payment request from Ukraine that could not be processed due to the EU sanctions. Just part and parcel of the previous one. And take note, which are the countries that are being negatively influenced by this? Hungary and Slovakia. And I'm sure that there is some political motivation, because the EU, especially the EC, does not like the way Hungary and the Hungarian people and their leadership has reacted to the sanction madness. And then we get this. Energy blackouts could be imposed by the government this winter under crisis management of power supplies. Political commentator James Melville, we are facing a monumental winter of discontent. And that's for the UK. And then the comments on that one. So, who is responsible for the supply of power in the UK? You know, that person who guarantees to match demand with supply, so there isn't any shortfall. It would seem that person isn't doing his job, surely. Yeah, well, we know. Why? We only get 4% of our gas from Russia. The rest comes from Norway, Qatar, France and our own. We have our own oil plus the regular suppliers. Petrol prices have already come down. Let's not manufacture a crisis for vulnerable people like me. Well, good luck. Your shit is booked. They don't feel a thing for people like you. When there's wind or sun, we import over 20% of electric from the EU and Norway. The EU has a major gas supply issue. They will ban energy exports. Norway is also worrying that the electric generation will be substantially lower this winter, and they might not have spare to export. And the plot thickens. And he continues, exactly, that appears to be significant lack of joined-up thinking on energy. Or perhaps there's been a lot of thought and they are taking us down the planned road, which amongst other things will be a massive reduction in car ownership and usage. And there are people that are seeing the light. But the fact of the matter is, the super race is in full control. All those North Sea gas and oil fields that were abandoned have all repressured, and have massive reserves still there. Oil and gas are not fossil fuels. There's no fossils down that deep. The term was invented by Rockefeller to make it seem like one day it could run out. And on this point, I spent a lot of time in the mid-2000s in Kuwait and Abu Dhabi. And one night we were having a barbecue in the desert and we were talking about the oil and so forth. And the one guy said to me, Mr. Klein, all I want to say to you is this. The process that makes oil, everybody knows that there is a process that created the oil. My question is, who says that process has stopped? Well, think about it. There's dozens and dozens of gas and oil rigs parked up in fjords and their rental prices are through the floor. UK government could have hired 6 of them and spudded on abandoned gas fields, taking 4 weeks to hit, pay layers, then 6 months to connect to a gas terminal. Willful neglect on the UK. And the truth, but once again, the UK leadership is not interested in the people. They are interested in doing some global thing. On August 10, the embargo on the import of Russian coal to the EU countries came into force. European energy suppliers managed to get their bearings before their politicians' warehouses are filled with coal by 100 to 105%. This even led to a slight decrease in the price of it, which increased from $100 to $400 per ton last year. It's still difficult to predict how long the EU countries will stretch the consumption of Russian coal reserves. The same, Poland will have to look for a replacement of 5 million tons. But that's not all. It will take 500 days for the Poles to unload such a volume in the ports of the country. Problems will also arise with railway logistics. Russia supplied coal to the Europeans with its own wagons. You must look at this coal thing in perspective, and you will understand that the EU has made decisions that is going to cripple the EU countries themselves. And like this guy says, if Poland wants to bring that coal in by ship, it will take them 500 days to unload such a volume from a ship. And there's a second problem. The rolling stock for transporting coal. The Russians were providing their coal in their rolling stock. So the Europeans just don't have the rolling stock to transport the coal. And if you want to see what coal transportation can do to infrastructure, you must come to South Africa and take a look here on the Highveld, our coal fields, how this government of ours has allowed the destruction of the railway system, and it is trucks that are moving the coal. Every road is into pieces. It's one pothole on the other, and the traffic is unbelievable. But I thought Europe were the intelligent people, civilized and aware of how things work together. In South Africa, I can blame it on IQ, but it seems to me the IQ problem is not only in South Africa. And then we get to this one. We continue the topic of main source of heat for Europe, firewood. The candidate for EU membership banned the transportation of wood at night. The decision was made by the Commission on Emergency Situations of Moldova. The reason for such a strange decree is the classic energy crisis for Europe. Another order is that the sale of firewood is possible only to household consumers and no more than 3 cubes per house or institution. Now, this is something that I just love. This could actually be a what a fuck post. Because, look at that! Back to wood. My question is, in my young days, every home had a wood fire or coal fire stove in the kitchen, and there were fireplaces in the living room and in the sitting rooms. So there were, and many bedrooms had fireplaces. So there were provision in the buildings, infrastructure in the buildings to make use of wood and coal. And over years that has disappeared and everything has been replaced with cleaner stuff. And now we're sitting in 2022 and people must go back to wood. My question is, where and how are they going to burn that wood? How are they going to utilize that wood? The reality is, for me in South Africa, I live in a part of the country that very rarely sees winter temperatures below 4 degrees C. But the European winters is something different. And in my young days I did a lot of travel by motorbike in my country. And in winter time I have been on the Highveld and traveling in sub-zero temperatures on a bike. And I can remember how cold I was. And doesn't matter how many layers of clothing I had on. After 2 or 3 hours in the saddle, I was cold to the bone. And I've slept in the Northern Cape in guest houses, where at night, 3, 4, 5 blankets and a duvet. And I wake up in the middle of the night, ice cold. And then I go out and sit in my car and run the engine so that the heaters can run to warm myself up. So I have a little bit of an indication of, or a memory of what cold can do. But Europe is a cold place. Minus temperatures is not strange in winter. And I don't know how the Europeans are going to survive this winter. But when you sit there in your garden, if you are lucky enough to have a garden, around your little open fire and heating your limbs and extremities on that wood fire, you must remember, you allowed that super race to take total control of your life, and they are the reason why you are going to freeze. A huge queue for firewood in Moldova. People spent several days in the fields, spent the nights under the fence. About 300 people were waiting in line in the village of Ivanka in the Orai district for firewood at a reduced price for several days, but only the first 60 of them were lucky. In order not to miss the queue, we spent the night under the fence. There is not enough firewood for the winter season in Moldova. About 2 million cubic meters are needed and only 800,000 are available. They want to cover the deficit by deforestation and import of pellets from sawdust and wood waste. What a joke. Actually, another what a fuck. In 2022, this is where we have ended up. And again, take note, the reason for your peril is Ursula von der Crazy and her cabal in Brussels. And you allowed them to take that much power. Please like, subscribe, have a nice day.